Welcome to the Path and Purpose podcast, where we explore the journey of living and leading from your soul's purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Cameron Martin. As a spiritual coach and leader, I've dedicated my life to helping changemakers, creatives, and conscious leaders align with their soul's calling. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of those who are paving the way for a more conscious and compassionate world. My purpose is to explore the intersection of spirituality and leadership, offering you practical insights and inspiration to live and lead with authenticity. Join me as we discover how to embrace our soul gifts, overcome barriers, and learn to lead from being. This podcast will inspire you to live in alignment with your soul's purpose and create a lasting impact, one conversation at a time. On today's episode, I'm here with Barbara Wythe. Barbara is an international peace activist, acclaimed author and publisher, a psychic channel, a composer and a performer, a workshop facilitator, and an inspirational speaker. She's the co-founder of Conflict Revolution, World Peace, one person at a time, starting with self, a revolutionary way to resolve conflicts of the psyche as a pathway to world peace, based on her work channeling the angels and Albert Einstein. I am very excited to have this conversation with her today, so welcome, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Cameron.
So happy to have you here. I'm going to start the conversation with a quick read of your birth chart. And so this is the first time I'm looking at it. Oh, okay, Miss Humanitarian. So your sun is in Aquarius, Mercury's in Aquarius in the first house. You are someone who absolutely is focused upon social justice, love for humanity, civil rights, all of these kinds of things. I did just read you're a peace activist. How beautiful is that? You quite literally know yourself as one with the rest of humanity. If I were to talk about the Aquarian age coming into being, knowing oneness, knowing that we are all connected, this is something that Barbara knows exceptionally well. This is part of your identity. In fact, your friends, your social groups, your connections, very important to you. When it comes to the things you like to talk about, well, all things Aquarius, but vibration, healing, energy. I'm very excited to talk to you about channeling because that is definitely Aquarian in this way too. Moon is in Leo. Girl likes to have fun. You have a huge heart. Love to connect and to share, obviously, with people, but you are someone who finds a lot of comfort in partnership and play. Children can be important to you as well. In this life, you're moving actually away from lessons related to motherhood and maternal and even work for that matter, and moving much more towards creating structures that are more spiritual in nature. So allowing people to explore themselves much more deeply, to explore the subconscious, to explore the unseen realms, which you love, and you have a lot of gifts there. But even more so, you're bringing those gifts forward to shift big picture systems and organizations, things like that. Your work is very important to you, and most of what you're doing is very much around, I could say it this way, the human heart and psyche and people's emotions, and helping them to understand the deeper aspects of their being. And you have strong opinions and a very unique perspective on things. So I cannot wait to get into this conversation with you. How'd we do?
Oh, spot on. Spot on.
I'm so funny for a moment. I'm like, yes, Aquarius, look at all of that.
It's big.
So I guess a great place to start is to kind of ask, where was sort of the beginning of your spiritual awakening or your own spiritual journey? Because I know we're going to have a lot to talk about here, but if you can bring us maybe to a moment that was really significant for you, maybe we can start there.
I think it was with music. I started playing piano when I was 4 or 5. I started writing songs when I was 12. And by the time I was out of high school, I was on the road. It was 1972, and I had 2 sets of original material. And the process of songwriting was really setting me up to be a channel, because it's the same process. You go into nothing and you listen And then you bring through the melody and the words and all of that. So that was really the setup. But in high school, my friend Mike, his mother was a psychic, and she was just an antenna. So there wasn't any angels or dead people or famous dead people. And a lot of that work was about really more about self-love and about healing my traumatized life than it was being predictive, although there were predictions, etc. So I had that knowledge and Edgar Casey, and um, I was reading tarot cards. So when I started to spontaneously automatic write, I think it was like 1987, it was probably in my early 30s. I knew what it was, but I was still rather surprised that I'd been typing this letter and suddenly all of this very profound information started to come out of me. And I typed, "Well, who are you?" And the answer was sound.
Hmm.
And I liked that because it wasn't personified, even though they were speaking in the same voice of we that my mentor's readings were in. But I could understand that, having been a musician all my life. And I think you were talking about where you thought you were going in this one direction in your life until, and I was going to be a rock star. That was all I ever wanted to do. I spent 20 years of my first 20 years of my adult life pouring everything that I had into that mission. And when I got to a point where I was winning awards and my music is very profound and powerful, but I got to a point where it wasn't working. I was addicted. I wasn't making any money. I was very unhappy. And that's when I started to channel. And so it was this kind of slow shift. I didn't give up music by any chance, but as I started to channel more and I channeled for people and I eventually went from writing to speaking, this shift started to happen within me. And in 1993, I wanted to do a group. I thought, what would these voices say to a group of people? Much like Edgar Casey used to channel for small groups in his living room. And nobody in my circle was interested. So
Oh
I
my
kind
God,
of,
I'd be down.
exactly. I thought, what you people do, but no, it was divinely meant that a new client came, Teresa, and she sent 6 of her girlfriends, and then her best friend Kim came. And Kim was not something who would ever have gone to a psychic. She was a very conservative businesswoman. She helped her father run World Aerospace, little pearls in her, handbag and business. And she was in crisis. It's how we all start to transform. And she and Teresa were best friends, and they started following me around at my gigs and talking about all this stuff. Nobody had ever done that before. So at the same time, I thought, hey, here's my group. They were already organizing a group ready to ask me if I could come and channel. And so in December of 1993, we did our very first group. And from that has come everything in my life that has transpired in this direction, where I've become this emissary for Albert Einstein in afterlife. And never would I have known that first group that we did. But in that group, the girls asked, "Who are you?" And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm an antenna, and that's sound, what do you mean? Who are they? And they said, "You can call us angels."
Hmm.
And I was real skeptical because to me, angelic stuff was all airy, fairy, light, and love. And these angels, they told us very specifically, they had this theoretical process that they felt like if people would involve themselves in it, it would resolve conflict first within. And the byproduct, which they stressed over and over, the byproduct would be world peace. But we need some real humans who are having real conflicts to test our ideas. And by then, the 3 of us were thick as thieves, and we weren't going to stop this. Yeah, sure, let's do it. And then, of course, it came time we had our first fight.
There's your conflict.
There it was. And, you have 3 people, but especially women, put 3 women together. You're bound to have conflict. Well, we all have conflict, and in the middle of this fight where we're very uncomfortable, and I'm like, well, you're, and she's like, you're. And I said, wait a minute. we just did this channeling session. We did the transcript. Let's go get it and read it, what they say. And the sentence was, if you're involved in a conflict, the root of your part is within you. And in that moment, it was just such a spiritual whoosh for all of us. We all kind of burst into tears. And then I came back to the table and said, okay, here's what I need to do. And Kim came back and saying, you know what? And me too. Here's what I need to do. And not only was that outcome pretty profound for a fight, but that night I went to work. I was singing at a hotel in Minneapolis, and there was a waitress there who was always very cold to me, which didn't matter to me. It was, we go to work, we go home. I walked in and she could not get enough of me. Oh, Barbara, I've got some cassettes that you might want. And she put money in my tip jar. And I started to make the conscious correlation between what these angels were telling me, that if we change it here, things change outside us in ways that we can't go directly at it. I couldn't pull her aside, and said, why do you hate me? Let's have a talk.
Mm-hmm.
That was really, really the beginning of what then eventually became conflict revolution, but all of the work that transpired from then.
Beautiful. Of course, my next question is, what did the angels tell you that this process is? I mean, obviously that if there's conflict, it is within you. I understand that as a principle. And divine timing, Barbara, I was mentioning to you right before the episode, I'm like, oh, I forgot the calendar. I was like, not expecting this conversation today, except it's exactly perfect because what I've been moving through over the last few days is my own internal conflicts, actually. And yes, they've showed up in the lives of other people. Well, not fighting, but actually just me getting really irritated and hurt by others. And the last few days has been this real process of being honest about what is still sitting inside of me. And there are still some beliefs that are not pretty. And I've worked on plenty, but some things that I hadn't seen to this depth anymore. I'm like, wow, I thought that was healed. And at the same time, I'm on this moment of real expansion. I mean, I can feel it in every ounce of my being, where there's so much opportunity and so much connection and so many miracles and things showing up in my life that it's amazing. But in this moment of expansion, the fear, the worry, the limiting beliefs, the stuff that's inside of me that ain't going with me to that frequency is coming up and is creating a level of conflict within, which is very real. So, having said that, divine timing, gotta love it. Of course, how we relate to said conflict, we recognize, well, it's actually a gift, right? If I recognize myself, I'm holding on to these things, these are my gifts, I can heal that, it's still within me. But I'm really curious, maybe what principles or what guidance came through around healing conflict within.
Well, and just quickly, I did a reading this morning, group channel this morning, where they talked about how we have been so embedded in a fear-based operating system for the whole of humanity that even people like you and I, who understand things and who do our work really diligently, it's still a massive amount of change in the operating system that we're going through. So don't be surprised if you're reaching these, and I'm going through exactly the same thing in this deep recognition of these patterns, these imprints that have been driving me subconsciously, really, because consciously I understand all that. I mean, I can tell you how the universe is manifest, but that
Yeah.
doesn't help me have to bypass this deep work that we're doing. So I'm going to give you the long and the short of it after a long time of research and development through the decades of what conflict revolution is. We work with what we call the three human dimensions. So intellect in our heads, intuition in our heart, and emotion in our solar plexus. And we separate them out because one of the things that we teach people to do in conflict revolution is first and foremost to cultivate a witness, which I'm sure you do. And then what are we looking for? Because a lot of people say, well, yes, I have to heal this within and I'm going to go within, but but what's in there? What is in there? And so in a very basic sort of revolutionary way, we have emotion as if, the heart does one thing, the kidneys do another. Each of these three human dimensions have their own form and function, and then they have a way that they work together. And some of the basic revolutionary parts of Conrev is that we deal with emotion completely with breath and body. We keep emotion out of the intellectual arena, or at least bypassing it through breath and moving it. And it's we want the whole gamut. There's no emotion we have to avoid because it's lesser frequency. We're looking for unification of all the emotional aspects of us. And as that moves up with our breath, we all do this. We get really emotional and then we find ourselves and go, wait a minute. Okay, just calm down, take some breaths. Emotion brings up intuition, which is really the sound of our compassion, our God, whatever, always telling us the next most advantageous step for the good of the whole system, never leading us wrong. And as that moves up into intellect, this is where all the conflict begins, because we've been given free will, which is operated in our intellectual area. We don't turn the corner, pull the hand down on the steering wheel to turn right as a command from our intuition. It's a command from our intellect. Intellect is saying, okay, and whether we hear it or not, I'm going to turn right and the hand goes there. So we've been given the power to say no to intuition, to say no to the voice of God within us. And when we learn how to, we call this aligning to compassion, because Einstein says compassion is the fifth fundamental force of the universe. It's the creative intelligence that uses all the other four fundamental forces to impel the creation of the physical world one step at a time. So at our root, we are compassion, always being impelled. We know that we're a unified field. We know everything that we need to know, but it's intellect. And that is oftentimes making decisions that's not aligned to that. And then it's simple, and we all have this too. Intuition says rest, stop.
And then we don't listen. Yeah.
No, and then we make decisions. Off we go, and we're this and that, and we wonder why we're crabby with people, and we're getting sick. And it's really that simple, but it's so precise in your relationship to yourself. Your domain is how much are you going to wake up in the morning after you say your prayer of gratitude, whatever. Are you going to commit to watching yourself and watching what you're feeling in a day, what your intuition is telling you, what is intellect doing to you in a day, and kind of separating them out to see. And in this conflict you're speaking of, and this too, these are just pieces that everyone knows, is what you're triggered by in other people is a sign for you to, and in conflict revolution, we create a sound bite. What's that person doing that's bothering you? Or what is the thing out there that you're projecting that's bothering you? And then we revolve it back to ourselves to say, okay, now I'm going to find out where in my life am I perpetuating this condition? It might be a direct mirror with who you're with. Kim and I were direct mirrors. You're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing this, like, stop. Other times it might be, I have a conflict I call the drunken marketing manager. Okay, she was a woman I worked for, and she gave me work to do, and then she complained about how I did it, even though I rose to the occasion and I did the work. And I got my soundbite. I was driving home from work every day going, I don't do that. If I ask somebody to do my work, I'm so grateful. And, my intellect is good. And finally I called Teresa and I said, here's my soundbite. What do you think? And without hesitation, she said, do you remember when you and your husband were having a hard time and you separated for a while and he was there to pay the mortgage and he cut the grass and he took care of the dog and he did the storm windows, and all you ever said was he didn't support you? And I had this aha moment. We call it hanging and dang, because your body, right? Your body goes, Dang, that is true. And you see it and you have that aha moment, and then you can take action there. Whatever action, how you forgive, how you make amends. And I did with my, I called him my future ex-husband. We're still very close, and then the next day I went to work and the marketing manager had been fired. And I always say people either rise to the occasion or they disappear because it's energetically somehow the influence we're having on the manifestation.
Totally. Oh my gosh, so much beautiful things to unpack here. One, I want to say I love the tool of the soundbite, spoken like a real musician, of course. Because often when I work with my clients, I really like that word. I will talk about the story, meaning what is the story you're telling yourself, or what is the thing that's going on inside your head, and then what's maybe really so. Understanding that what you're running through your head, that soundbite, it's what's sticking, it's what's triggering you, but that's not really what it is. That's the gift. And yes, this beautiful awareness of recognizing that when we are triggered, that this is the most beautiful moment to be able to see what's actually inside of me. Because if I'm feeling triggered by something, there's something within myself, some conflict, some separation of consciousness at some level, right? You separated yourself from the creator, there's your conflict. And when we see it, we're like, oh, then I have access to it. Hey there. If you're intrigued by the deep exploration of your soul's journey, then you might be interested in QHHT, Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. Think of it as an experience of a past life regression meets a conversation with your higher self, meets an opportunity for physical healing. During a QHHT session, you'll experience a transformative experience and access insights about your life's purpose, past lives, and discover the root of chronic physical issues you may be experiencing. Visit yourpathinpurpose.com/QHHT to learn more and schedule your session with me today. We started this conversation with an astrology reading. There are many tools that are beautiful. We're going to talk more about channeling because I want to. But astrology, for example, is so powerful. My listeners know this. Little slip there. That was great. Books, working on it. Anyway, when we have tools like astrology or human design or others that help us to remind us who we truly are at an energetic level, that's really powerful to see and to know who we are. But then to recognize it within the body is really that next level. And what you're talking about is the separation of the three parts that happen. I think this is where mastery truly comes in, when we recognize, oh, inside of me, I'm feeling this right now. I'll share with my audience my processing that's been happening for me in the last week or so. I was around some people. I got triggered. My mind was played that role of the higher self, the more evolved being. Oh, they don't know, they're unconscious, they don't know what they're saying, they don't recognize. That was really ignorant. But like there was love and oneness, and I just felt nothing but observation and love for them. But then recognized a day or so later that my body was not feeling good at all. A lot of tension in my upper chest and shoulders. And I was starting to get really irritable, and I did work around this with a body worker of mine, but even sitting with myself and recognizing, oh, well, the mind made up some version of this of it's okay. They don't know. They're not conscious. But other aspects of my being were not agreeing with that. There were other aspects of my being that were quite pissed and frankly hurt. And my mind hadn't even allowed me to see that I was hurt until my body was physically showing me around my heart and throat that I wasn't speaking what needed to be said. And because I took on what they were saying, I was hurting myself. One of my greatest gifts is my ability to hold space for people, but it's also can be a challenge. And I accept a lot of hurt and things that I don't necessarily need to with others. But it was in the recognition of, oh, my brain was doing this, the mind, the intellect was doing this, but this part, my heart, is not feeling the same way. And no, I don't feel empowered. Solar plexus doesn't feel great right here. And as I started to explore what that was, right, what is the mirror, what is the trigger or anger or whatever, it was hurt. Although anger and hurt are like the same, they're connected. But the recognition of, oh, I don't feel accepted by these people. But really, what came up later while I was at the park watching a very handsome man working out was, oh shit, there's still something in me that doesn't feel accepted by others for my sexuality, for being a gay man. And then it was the realization of, oh, there's an aspect of you that doesn't accept that fully yet. And why was this coming up? I mentioned a lot of expansion. I've been calling in my divine partner, and my God, do I know that's coming closer, because so many things have been brought up in my own being. And the recognition of, oh, this is the belief that you're still holding on to. Now, mind you, I've worked a lot with that in my life, a lot. But to realize, oh, shoot, this is still in there. That's still present in my energetic body. And as you're talking about, how do you bring that conflict to revolution and how do you resolve it? It's about recognizing that you're part of all of that. There might be aspects of me that are a higher self that can see things from this perspective, but there's a human here that's hurt. And there's another part of me, my inner child, that needs some attention because, he hasn't been seen for, his whole life or whatever. But I share all of that for my listeners, and I'm sure you'll have something to reflect on here, but for my listeners to see that this is actually what the work looks like. If you're going to be working with me and I'm supporting you in your own journey, it's going to look something like this, but we ultimately have to take this upon ourselves. This is what spiritual evolution, our consciousness evolution looks like. So Barbara, I'll give you a space to respond to what I shared.
Well, and this is why when they said you can call us angels, I was a little hesitant because I thought this work, yeah, there's divine stuff in it, but this is the hardest work of our life. And it's the most humbling because when we're so, especially what a perfect description of how we intellectually, we have the capacity to understand many, many things. The angels used to say, you can go into a library and you can read all about how to fly a plane. You can even put up a little, fake cockpit and pretend you're doing this. But when you walk out to the tarmac and you get into a plane, it's a whole different story. So what you're doing is, well, it's conflict revolution. It's taking responsibility for your domain. And then I think it's this beautiful uh synergistic puzzle. There's no, like, people want this A, B, C, and then D, and we're going to be fine. And we can do that to a point. But when you're looking at what you've just revealed, that, and I have exactly the same story in my own words. And it's about partnership, and it was about early trauma and realizing that, and I'm probably old enough to be at least your mother. So I've got even all that more work that I've done that makes me think, hey, I've been doing this, nearly 70 years and shouldn't I be blah, blah, blah. But it's this beautiful puzzle that when we can stop and sit and be with our emotion, as uncomfortable and sad and morose and hopeless and depressive as it is, if we can embrace that and at least know that there's two different ways that you approach this. So it's like if you had a heart problem, you would treat your heart one way. And if you had a stomach problem, you treat your stomach completely different. So when we're talking about the emotion and how we're going to do that, that is just about release.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling, breathing, releasing, whatever intellectual thoughts we need to put in there. My mantra used to be, I don't need to know why I'm this mad. I just need to feel and breathe. And so I could deter it from adhering to those thoughts about the other people or how I'm never going to have a partnership or all those things that emotion then fuels that reality in our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And then the completely different skill is, what are we going to do with this, the wild horses of our intellects that hold such an important piece to even having a human experience. It's always defining and projecting and perceiving, that's its purpose, is to say that's a computer and that's a chair, and it's this massive, massive part of the machine that gets control of the whole thing and can't hear your intuition. Your intuition maybe is saying, breathe your anger. It's always impelling you to take one step, like let it go, breathe. But it's going to want to, no, I can't breathe now and I can't do this. So how do we approach that? That's a whole different skill set.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying too, probably with your work, is that, everybody sort of has their own comfort zone in this hard work. I have a friend who, every time I'm in that emotional place, she cheerleads me. Yay, good, feel and breathe. Yeah, keep going, feel and breathe. And even though I want to go, oh, well, he said this and she said that, she says, no, feel and breathe. And other times you have to walk through what the stories are and get down, because otherwise the intellect will go crazy and go on and on and on and on and on if you don't stop and go, okay, let's just get to the gist of it. Let's get to the soundbite. And then how you put those together. How do you change your thinking? This is intricate, intimate work that really intense.
And I really love the perspective. I want to highlight this that's coming through in this conversation, because I talk and teach people about living in alignment with their soul's purpose, which requires that you know who you are and that you connect with your higher self and you do develop a connection with your intuition. But really, what's coming through in this conversation, I think in a loud way, is that when you're committed to that, all the things that you are not are going to have to come up. Everything that you're not, everything that is not your truth, your essence, your soul's beingness, is going to have to be seen so that you can align more fully with that. And so I know that fully. I mean, my goodness, yes, I've had emotions. Yes, I still have some processing I need to do. I'd love to sit and journal later today. Although I tried to do it yesterday, ego went bonkers. I can't do that. I have this to do. I have this to do. I have this to do. And watching it is a gift. But recognizing I'm fully aware that what's coming up inside of me is so that I can see what is not actually me, so that I can align more fully with my truth, the truth of my being. This is what that looks like. And I love what you were saying. For me, some of those old patterns I get into when I'm in these moments of growth and uncomfortable, I will work more. That's like the default. I sit in front of a computer. I have so many projects to do. I have things to do. That's an avoidant tactic that my body is used to doing. And if I go back to most of my life, most of my uncomfortable feelings, especially around my sexuality as a teenager and early 20s, I just worked like crazy. I was the top kid, and I wasn't the valedictorian. I was third, but still, first in my college degree, whatever that was. I had like 3 jobs when I was in college, like all of these things just to avoid the uncomfortable emotions that were there. And I watched myself just yesterday where my intuition is saying, sit down to meditate, just spend a few minutes. And my God, the ego wanted nothing to do with that. So rather than fighting it, I just watched, I observed. Oh, wow, I'm sitting at my computer again trying to do something. Oh, wow, I'm avoiding eating, which is another thing that I do, which is weird because then I feel tired and whatever. But the point is, as we move through these things, we can actually observe what are those coping mechanisms, what are those limiting beliefs, what are those things that are showing up, and they're all mirroring whatever's going on for us.
I was reading your last blog post that I got in my email about the energies. What's going on right now with all the planets and the intensity of everything. And as I was reading that the other day, because like I said, I'm totally in the same kind of discovery process right now that you've described. I thought this has to be for this divine purpose of bringing all this up so we can see ourselves. And when we don't project, it becomes, I think it becomes our power, really.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And frankly, that's what this period of time on this planet is ultimately about. I'm curious. I'd like to get into the conversation around a channeling And I don't know if you want to share anything that you learned about this particular moment we're living in or whatever, but I would love to hear about channeling a little bit for you and how that evolved. And no, I haven't ignored Albert Einstein, so I want to know more about that too. But
Well, when I first started to channel, and especially when I went from writing to speaking, because I had that background in it of having Mike's mom be the psychic and close her eyes and speak. I was very familiar with it. But
yeah, because I was going to ask you. So it started with writing, and then now
yes,
you are a vocal channel.
yes, about a year of writing, people would come over and I'd write. I thought, come on,
It's
you
taken a long time.
it's taken a long time. You've had these, but it's a really much weightier thing when it becomes sound. Right
Yeah.
now, you're into the next level of creation is sound. But I did it, and it was the first time was just a shot in the dark, and it was really phenomenal. People were weeping, and we didn't record it or anything. But when I started to do it, I was put through. I think it was this intentional training program, because when you channel, like, you have to get to know yourself in life generally. I had to get to know what was my ego, what was whatever this other energy was, which to me for a while I was just an antenna, right? So how do I get out of the way? So what I would do is I would channel, and I would record it or write it down, and then I would write down what I thought it meant, like predictively. Here's what's going to happen.
Hmm.
And then I would go about my day or my week, whatever, because I was doing it intentionally. Like, I want to write this down and then see what really happens. So I could learn what was the difference between what I thought was going to happen in my ego, then what really truly happened, and how that translated into the words that were spoken. So I went through that kind of sort of training on my own. But when I started to channel for the girls, and it was angels, the information was so outside of my conscientious thinking. I didn't know what they were going to say. Who knew they were going to be angels asking us to test this revolutionary process, on ourselves? But it was so impacting for us that what they were telling us, these angels, was were changing our lives quickly, and for the way better. And we had a conversation, and I said, I'm not comfortable calling them angels, but how do you guys feel about this? And Kim, the least spiritual one or psychic one, said, I don't care if it's the Easter Bunny. What they're telling us is absolutely changing my life.
Yeah.
It's bringing me together. It's helping me find God. It's changing my relationship to my family. It's changing in such a positive way. And I think she is the one that went on to write a book called Second Coming, Awakening the Christ Within, because she's very much into, she's a Bible study, very much into it. And she's now translated the Bible into sort of these angelic terms of what it really means against what they mean. But I went on, and speaking of Einstein, so we published our first book, Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, Talking to the Angels, and it's just the
Oh, I
pure,
love the title.
and it was our diaries. We were told, keep a paper trail, because people are going to want to know later on. People are going to want to know, and this is your research. And it wasn't a happy, sort of angelic ending. We ended in a fight. And through the years, we've put these things to the test, still between us. Now, 30 some years later, we're pretty much not overall conflict between us, but we have our work that we do so seamlessly now that we don't even have to process together or do any of that. But the channeling of Einstein came about because my literary agent had gotten a call after we published our book in 1997. A year later, she got a call from a paranormal tabloid in London looking for an interview with Princess Di on the 1 year anniversary of her death from beyond the grave. And I thought, what? Because I had now learned that I could speak to people who had passed on, but they would appear to me. and
Yeah,
say,
you
I
don't
need to
go
get you.
asking for them.
Yeah, no, it's like, who's ready? And even people who came for readings would say, we talk to my dead grandma? And I would say, I don't know. That's not really what I do unless grandma
Yeah.
shows up. But I thought, well, let's just see what they say. So I channeled everything. I typed it and questions and answers. And when I read it back, it was so profound. I was weeping. I could hear her speaking and the details of her relationships. But what was so profound was her whole message was, if everyone who put flowers in front of the palace after I died would do this stuff that the angels are talking about, we could have world peace.
Yeah.
And I said, that's brilliant. Then get it in a tabloid that 40 million people. And she said, I know, but we are not in charge. Okay, somebody's in charge. So, of course, the tabloid didn't want it because it didn't have enough dirt on Charles and Camilla. But my agent and I thought, hey, maybe there's other famous dead people who want to have a conversation. So we made this list, and honest to God, Einstein wasn't even on it. He just wasn't on it. And we got to John Kennedy, and all of these interviews just blew my mind anyway, because I didn't know very much about these people. And John Kennedy said, okay, put your list away, because we're a party of 12 who have been working on this message, and we'll tell you who's coming up in the queue. It's like, okay.
And has most of the message coming through these beings about the conflict revolution work?
They each had a little segment of culture. So John Kennedy was about the politics and that kind of power, and Jacqueline Onassis was more about publishing, and Nicole Brown Simpson was about race relations and sexual and abuse.
Interesting.
So everybody had a topic. And so when we got to Einstein, and they said, okay, Einstein, Albert Einstein, and I went to channel through speaking, it was the voice of all my channeling. And it took me several years to really even fully admit that I thought it was Einstein, because it's like, oh my God, this is not just every channel I've ever done. This voice, very heavy. It had like almost a Yiddish accent to it. It was the voice from my original spontaneous automatic writing. And if I went back far enough, it was in my music, as Einstein was also a very proficient musician. And so I kept it sort of to myself until I published Party of 12, the Afterlife interviews. And that was in 2001 in June. And then on 9/11, after that happened and everything changed as far as world peace, suddenly world peace one person at a time, starting with self, which was a really nice idea back in the 90s. But, we were pretty prosperous, and, people were pretty happy. And so world peace was like, whatever. Suddenly people were interested after the towers came down. So I did a session very specifically to channel the Party of 12, headed up by Einstein. And from there, in 2005, I thought, hey, let's just do a book for Einstein. It's the 100-year anniversary of his miracle year. Let's see what he has to say. I'm so like, I don't know what he's going to say. Let's see. Well, he delivers from afterlife a unified field theory, which he didn't do in life, complete with
you?
Yes. Yes. And
Also, I have to ask, do you know, are you learned in these topics that are coming
No.
through to you?
No. All I ever wanted to be was a rock star. In fact, I just posted on my Facebook page my high school report card where I got a D in physics. And I was like, see, this is not.
This ain't me.
So he brought through this unified field theory with this map of human consciousness, because we don't have an experience with the physical universe unless our human consciousness is interacting with the energy. Mm-hmm. And then probably the most profound at the time was his scientific, quantifiable definition of compassion, with a capital C, as the fifth fundamental force of the universe. And then he goes on to say how it influences energy to create matter in such a way that creates physical life, and then explains one step at a time how it all works. And I have to tell you, because I'm not a physicist, although, I like to entertain ideas, and certainly music is mathematical, but I said to him, I said, okay, so you're telling me that the source of everything is in the center of the planet and it operates like a black hole. And in 2005, I have to go out into the world, not knowing if that is absolutely ridiculous. And I had to trust it. And now in 2024, look up Brian Greene and his string theory and his idea that all life originates in a smaller sort of black hole thing, and it's in the center of the planet. And so it's been a long, long road of channeling Einstein, and finally coming to a place after all these years where I can say quite definitively, to me, it's Einstein, but you have to hear what it is. And then most people don't even bother to have an argument about if it's Einstein or not, because it's so brilliant and complete.
Hey there, I'm excited to share something new with you. Introducing Beyond the Show, our new monthly live connection calls where you can continue the conversation. If you're loving the insights and stories shared on the show and want to dive deeper, these live monthly sessions are your chance to engage directly with me, my guests, and with fellow listeners. Each month, we'll gather inside the Path and Purpose community for a real-time discussion and Q&A with one of our featured guests. It's a great opportunity to explore topics further, ask questions, and be part of a community of like-minded souls. Interested in joining us? Head over to yourpathandpurpose.com/community to become part of the free community and get access to these exciting live calls. Can't wait to see you there and to continue the conversation. So what do you do with that information that's come through? What has he tried to show or teach or share or continue?
In the big picture of this story, the angels, right, who were working on a much more just regular human, let's resolve our conflicts so we can thrive and we can have world peace, to the science that explains why conflict resolution works. It's the theoretics of why, when we change this part of the wave, that's these three human dimensions in the non-physical, it perfectly manifests into the lens of the physical world, whatever's on that wave. And it's why the system can be perfect and still manifest conflict, because it's creating whatever's on that wave. And when we can't see what's on that wave except for what's manifest in our world, and that's why we revolve, right? I can't look back and see the wave that's going to the center of the planet, but I can see the conflicts in front of me and go, okay, these are reflections of something that's going on here. So let's bring it back here to me and see what it is. And that, and, I asked him early on about, I don't want to do this if people are going to be asking me to do scientific, like mathematical formulas. I'm not doing it. I don't care. I don't, it's too crazy to begin with. But if I could start doing that, it would just freak me out. And he said, you don't have to, because this theory is meant to inspire those people. And it inspires you no matter what it is. Like, as you listen, you have a system that you use, and it's inspiring you to see your own system like in this new way, because it is a unified field. It's everything. It has everything on these maps, absolutely everything. So it's really meant to inspire people to the truth, to then take their work further inside themselves. And I've, for a long time, I've prayed and I've said to him, put me in front of the scientists, put me in front of the scientists. And I've had amateur scientists and people along the way, and the many times that I've presented this, who have had input in it. But last April, I got to present at the Science of Consciousness conference put on by the University of Tucson, Arizona, by the left brain scientists. For 30 years, they've been meeting to try to find the nature of consciousness. And when they started, they were all like these completely geeky, nerdy scientists who were doing their formulas and doing their theories. And as they began to discover the nature of consciousness, suddenly the Rumi poets were coming. And suddenly the meditators were coming. And suddenly those of us who do the intuitive arts on the right side were bringing information that they couldn't deny. So I got to rub elbows and talk to all these scientisty guys, and
So
I
the
love
rocker scientist makes, I'm sorry, the rocker psychic makes it to the scientist fair.
it's like I don't know. I talked to dead people, and there were so many young scientists, like young women and young men, who were just like, oh, they just got it. They just like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. So I left there going, all right, I am totally on the right track, and this is one of the things I want to do with this information is get it to the scientists, because it really informs everybody who's working on unified field theories. Nassim Harriman is doing, John Hageland, Brian Greene. I can put them all their theories on these maps, but they don't. Nobody has this compassion as the fifth fundamental force and how it influences the creation. It's so beautiful.
My gosh. And maybe that's a way we can finish the conversation about compassion itself and its connection. But before we do, I don't want to jump over what you were talking about for those who maybe are not super scientific or into unified field theory or any of these sort of things. Our experience as a human happens through consciousness first. Even our physical bodies and all the things that we manifest, this is what you just told us, but I'm saying it in a different way. All the things that manifest in our physical reality happen first in consciousness. Because there is a point of consciousness, we can experience what is physical reality. And, it also creates a lot of issues because, yes, we are infinite beings of love and, well, maybe compassion. I don't know.
Mhm.
And when we come down in this human form, we literally siphon ourselves off from all of the rest of creation, or most of the creation, which has us feeling like, oh my God, this life as a human is horrible, and I don't know my intuition, and is there a God there? And everything feels separate. But the reality is, our whole experience of third dimensional reality is because consciousness can focus somewhere. Even our experience of time itself is just that, a focus and a awareness of consciousness in one particular point. But as we come to understand our true nature in all of the tools and the conversations that you are having, so whether this is through spiritual knowledge, whether this is through your own meditation practice, whether this comes through psychic readings, whether whatever, and as you start to heal yourself, we actually align with more truth of all of this. And when I speak about, connecting with our higher self, or aligning to our higher self, aligning to the nature of our being, so that our soul's expression is really just leadership on the planet, that we lead actually from our soul by knowing the truth of our being. And I'm very curious to know what thoughts you have about leadership in this sense, but also compassion, because if compassion is the fifth element we need, I'm curious how you see leadership, because for me, and my listeners know this, I preach it all the time, that as we come to know ourselves, as we come to know our true soul's desires, our gifts, as we know the truth of our being, and we are actively engaging in this process that you and I have been talking about for the last, hour or so, um, then our leadership changes. By nature, we shift the way that we be in the world, and how we act and how we treat others and what we choose to do with our energy and where we place our consciousness, that all shifts. And so as we recognize our being and we lead from being, the world looks different. Now, I know you have different language for this, but I am curious to know how you see this as far as its impact in leadership.
Well, you know, and I know, and I think everyone knows that the greatest leaders are the ones that are authentic and who practice what they preach.
Yeah.
Your parent, your politician, your priest, whoever can tell you all kinds of things that you can understand. But if they're going off and not actually implementing what they say is the highest processes, or whatever they're professing, it, it's weak. It's not leadership. And the only way we can actually influence people and influence the world in our leadership is to have that complete alignment to that truth within. And it's very hard in the culture today because there's all kinds of things culture wants to tell you that you need to do in order to be accepted, in order to be a part of the group. And leadership, to be able to be your own person, to take care of yourself. No one can take care of your intellect. No one can feel your feelings. No one can hear your intuition. It's your leadership in your life that is the most important piece. And then whatever radiates out from there of whatever kind of leader you're going to be, whether you're a leader to be a really good friend, or you're a leader like me who's going to go out and stand up in front of a lot of people and explain this, I better darn well
Be
be
living
practicing
it.
this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm just a talking head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, it feels the same way. I remind myself that every single day with the message that I have, but the same thing with my clients, the people that I work with. And it is in this space when you truly do tap into this greater truth within yourself or spiritual aspect of yourself, however you want to call that, where there's much more power because you recognize that you, the ego, like Cameron, the ego, the identity, I'm not really doing anything. I'm along for the ride, but the message is coming through me. I mean, I'm a channel as well, although I don't channel Einstein. That I know of. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just becomes a natural expression. Everything shifts. The way you be in the world, I'm not trying to push and shove and change and manipulate and control, which is an old paradigm of leadership, but I'm allowing for being and allowing things to come through. And I know that much of what I spoke in this episode alone, I'm not consciously thinking of. So it's going to land in vibration for listeners, for you, for whoever's supposed to hear this. It's a very different way of being when you recognize the nature of your own being.
Absolutely. And if you think about leadership on a kind of a, like a, let's say, corporate level, in an environment where there's so many personalities and there's so much energy and group dynamic, when you have somebody at the helm who knows who they are, who is loving with themselves, fair with themselves, in control of themselves, regulating themselves, and then turning their compassion onto others in the group and not allowing the conflicts of the group to devolve, and always elevating through their example. I mean, those are the greatest leaders, and it does shifts everything.
Yeah, and it starts from within because you can't be that for somebody else if you can't be it for yourself. You can't even honor the beingness of others if you can't honor your own beingness first. And thank you for reminding me because I wanted to talk about compassion. So, what is compassion and what is the role of compassion in leadership and changing our world?
Well, in the scientific explanation of compassion as the fifth fundamental force, this creative intelligence, this God force that uses the other four fundamental forces to impel the creation of the universe one step at a time. But on a really human level, on that in that lens, compassion is to me an alignment to God, which is truth. It's an alignment to the truth, and we know the truth by what our bodies tell us, not what our intellects tell us. And the angels once said to us they were concerned about how they were going to inspire us to do this work because it was so out there to think that, hey, will you test this on your conflicts? And what they realized early on was that it wasn't them who inspired us, it was the truth. And compassion plus energy equals consciousness. And then consciousness plus what we call math, which is all of the mathematics that's programmed to create your DNA body, everything you're experiencing, equals mass. So compassion plus this mathematics in our source will eventually create the mass of the physical world. And one of the things that compassion does is it imbues all of our energy with the absolute truth that we are one body, that we are one being. And how I treat you is how I treat me. And it's a giant reflection. And so I think compassion impels us and inspires us to live in that alignment. And that changes everything.
Yeah. And compassion is essentially creative life force itself. It's very interesting. I'm reflecting, I say this often with my clients, of course, as they're moving through their own challenges, shadows, dark nights, whatever, to remember to have compassion for yourself in the process. And I'm acutely aware that it is a great moment for me to have compassion for myself around what I'm holding and I'm seeing and I'm knowing and I'm experiencing within myself. But it is going to shift my perspective in a very different way to know that compassion itself is a creative force. So you are, when you're choosing to align with the vibration, I guess you could call it that, of compassion, you are aligning with a creative force that, of course, can help move and shift anything within you and create anything within you.
Yes, and it creates your physical body, and your physical body projects all that consciousness and then perceives it back. It's the most powerful creative force that there is in the universe, for sure.
Oh my gosh. And even just this conversation about compassion, I feel so much in my solar plexus, like, and right at the diaphragm right now, which feels like an up level for me. I'm sure it's happening for others who are listening. Wow. Okay, this brings a different level of perspective to compassion. So for those of you who are maybe moving through something like most of us right now, how can you have compassion and extend that for yourself? Because that in and of itself is a creative force to whatever is meant to manifest through you, whatever's on the other side of this. Beautiful. I am curious before we close, is there or have there been messages about this time that we live through and the major lessons for us that maybe have come through Einstein or others that maybe you'd like to share and leave us with?
No, I'm going to tell you that the message has been the same since the start, is that we cannot give what we don't have. So if we don't have love for ourselves, we cannot give it to other people. And that's one of the main rudimental messages of the angels and Einstein, and that our lives are these magical creations where we've been given the power to have control over our domain so that we can do that and make those choices. So I'm excited. I think, Einstein has, the channeling rarely gets morose as far as, we're on the edge of World War III. I mean, they'll talk about that, but the idea is that we make it. And the only way that we make it into this higher consciousness, into manifesting this world where compassion is the operating system, not fear, is to vision that it's already happened. And so, yeah, no matter how hard or sad or scary or threatening it looks, we have the power. So let's use it.
Mm. Beautiful. There's nothing else to add there. Barbara, thank you so much. I feel elevated. I feel so grateful for our time together today. I'm sure listeners will love the episode too, but thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you, Dr. Martin.
And if you'd like to connect with Barbara and her work, you can find out more information about her in the show notes. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
A heartfelt thanks to you for tuning into this episode. I'm Dr. Cameron Martin, and it's been an honor to support you on your path to self-discovery. As you reflect on today's conversation, remember that the journey toward living and leading from your soul's purpose is ongoing. You're never alone in it. Until next time.